How's everyone doing? This is Laura, and in the world of trucking, drivers are up against one of the toughest markets we've seen in years. But some folks are using this really clever strategy to not just get by, but to actually come out on top. It's a fascinating lesson in working smarter, not harder. So let's just kick things off with a question that seems like a total no-brainer. In trucking, is a longer trip always more profitable? I mean, you'd think so, right? More miles should equal more money. But what's wild is that right now, the market is turning that whole idea completely on its head. And the reason for this huge shift? Well, it's the single biggest challenge that truckers are facing, something the industry calls a soft freight market. So what does that actually mean? Honestly, it's just basic supply and demand. There are way too many trucks out on the road and not nearly enough loads to keep them all busy. And when that happens, you get this fierce competition for jobs that just pushes rates, what a trucker gets paid, way, way down. Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting. Shippers, they tend to treat long hauls like buying in bulk. They expect a kind of volume discount, so they pay a lower rate for every mile you drive. But short hauls, they often pay a higher rate per mile, mostly to make up for all the time the driver spends just loading and unloading. It creates this really tricky financial puzzle for drivers to figure out. But, and this is the cool part, some of the sharpest dispatchers and drivers out there have found a brilliant way to flip this whole situation to their advantage. They've come up with a strategy that totally rethinks the goal of a day's work. It's not about chasing the most miles anymore. The solution is called short-haul load stacking. The whole idea is to book and run 2, sometimes even 3, of those shorter, higher-paying loads all in the same day, instead of getting locked into one of those long, low-paying cross-country trips. And this quote right here, it just captures the entire philosophy perfectly. You stop chasing those cheap, long-distance miles. Instead, you focus on stacking up the healthy profit margins from a bunch of smaller jobs. It's a complete shift in mindset. So, the big question is, does it actually pay off? Well, this number's pretty convincing. Some research from DOT shows that a driver can pull in an extra $620 on a round trip from Miami to Atlanta just by splitting it into 2 shorter, higher-paying chunks. The miles are the same, but the profit is a whole lot bigger. Now, that sounds great in theory, but how do they actually pull it off? It's not easy. So let's crack open the dispatcher's playbook and see how they build one of these perfectly profitable days. It all comes down to some seriously meticulous planning. First, you've got to sequence the loads perfectly, like a morning run that delivers by noon with an afternoon load already lined up and ready to go. Then, you keep those loads tight, geographically, so you're not wasting time and fuel driving an empty trailer. You're also hunting for what's called quick turn freight, things like simple drop and hook loads, so you don't get stuck at a loading dock for hours. And finally, the golden rule. You always build in a time cushion for traffic, delays, the unexpected. This strategy doesn't work just anywhere, though. You absolutely need a high density of freight, a whole lot of available loads all packed into a small area. And right now, one of the best places in the entire country to pull this off is the southeastern United States. And the market data tells the whole story. See, for both dry van and flatbed freight, you see tight capacity. Now, that's just industry speak for there are more loads than there are available trucks. And that gives carriers bargaining power and keeps rates strong, which makes the whole region a perfect hunting ground for these stackable jobs. And here's where the action is really happening, in these high-volume, short-distance corridors. A perfect example is the lane from Atlanta-Savannah, which connects that massive port to all the inland distribution centers. Another hotspot, that manufacturing cluster between Charlotte and Greenville. These are exactly the kinds of repeatable routes that are just perfect for stacking 2 loads in a single day. But, and this is a big but, this high-intensity strategy comes with one huge, non-negotiable challenge, the driver's clock. Every single thing has to be done while staying perfectly within the legal limits. Which brings us to the most critical piece of the whole puzzle. Federal rules give drivers a very strict 14-hour on-duty window each day. And when you're doing multiple pickups and deliveries, that clock can run out really, really fast. So how on earth do they manage it? The answer is this clever and totally legal tool called the split sleeper berth provision. Basically, it lets a driver split their required 10-hour rest break into 2 pieces. A qualifying break, let's say 3 hours spent off-duty waiting for that second load, doesn't count against their 14-hour clock. It's like it pauses the stopwatch, giving them the extra time they need to finish that second run without getting a violation. It's a real game changer. So, when you put it all together, what's the big takeaway here? In a market where just driving more miles doesn't mean more profit, success is being completely redefined. It's not about driving farther anymore. It's about dispatching smarter and making every single hour of the day count. And that brings us to a final thought. This strategy, this idea of breaking down one big job into a series of smaller, more valuable parts, that's not just a trucking thing. It really makes you wonder, right? What other industries reward this exact same kind of smart, strategic thinking? It's something to think about.